if they connect and bloom, oh, bloom. Showing if they connect and bloom.
Welcome to the Bloom Show. This is Sahid, your host. The Bloom Show is brought to you by New Bloom Media and New Bloom Solutions. And this show's intention is to connect the floral industry to hot topics, to information that makes the industry tick and move, to each other, to the community, to innovation, and to just the industry in a whole. This show is by the floral industry for the floral industry. And this is a part of the Tariff series. So we started the Tariff series right when we heard the news of what was happening. And Santiago was a gentleman enough to reach out to me, Santiago Gomez de la Torre, the president of Airglades, to reach out and said, I have an amazing person that could come on the show. And I just met her now. She is dynamic and fun. So I'm looking forward to chatting with her. Jennifer Diaz from Diaz Trade Law. And I think it was important to bring on someone that this is their daily grind to talk about to changes that we've seen, how dynamic these changes are, where are they headed, where are we going. I'm looking at some good numbers today. She's going to bring some stats as well and some data. So it's going to be exciting to have these conversations. As I've always said, this show is by the floral industry, for the floral industry. So feel free to ask questions, chime in, give shout outs if you recognize anybody, and chime in, because this is for the floral industry, by the floral industry. And don't forget to subscribe and like if you like it. So without further ado, we're going to invite Mrs. Jennifer Diaz from Diaz Trade Law and Santiago Gomez de la Torres of Airglades. Give me 2 seconds and I will bring them in.
The bloom, showing if they connect and bloom, oh, bloom. Showing if they connect and bloom.
So
I feel like the Jennifer Hudson show where you like dance down the aisle.
I see you dancing to it. I saw you dancing to it.
Right? I like it. It's good. It's catchy.
I love it. My manager that we have here, our project manager, created it, so we're really happy with it, and it's very.
Tell him kudos. He needs a raise. Don't forget that year-end wise.
Don't say
when all the whiplash is gone from our tariff craziness and there's some extra funds lying around, he gets some extra dancing money.
I told you guys it's going to be a fun show today. So, Jennifer,
always with Jenny is always a fun show.
Oh, it is fun.
It's the only way we keep our sanity these days. We have to have some fun, because otherwise you're just done.
I think we got to bring you on more often, like a weekly
I think
show.
so too.
How about that? So, Jennifer, do me a favor, in your awesome personality way, can you share about yourself? Who are you and what do you do?
Sure. So 20 years ago, I tripped and fell and started in the customs and international trade world accidentally. That's the number one question. How the hell did you become a customs and trade lawyer accidentally? I tripped literally and fell and wound up in a law firm who said customs and international trade are nothing. And I said, great, that sounds great. Is there a book I can read? Because I didn't understand what that actually meant. And it's a dynamic, psychotic world where you're in head first. You get to know what the hell you're doing about 5 years in. I'm about 20 years in now. I became a board certified customs and international trade attorney 5 years in, and now I've gone through 3 designations of recertifying, and I've strictly been in this crazy import-export world, and I would say it's like a drug. It's addicting, because every day is constantly evolving and changing in our customs and trade world. So you have to be addicted to chaos, addicted to madness, addicted to 47 federal regulatory agencies making your life nice and chaotic. So that is my world. I've been president of Diaz Trade Law for the last going on 10 years now. I started at another firm, and I was with them for 10 years, and I've now had almost 20 years in, and strictly dealing with customs, FDA, and the other federal regulatory agencies that regulate trade. So for flowers, you're mainly dealing with U.S. Customs and Border Protection and the ag group as well, checking for those fun insects. We've done those cool inspections and port tours and so on. So the industry is a crazy, fun, dynamic one where obviously you're dealing with regulations, you're dealing with federal regulatory agencies, you're dealing with everything in between. So we deal with typically enforcement, the oh no, something went wrong. Oh no, there was a pest in my crate. I'm so sorry. What do I do? And, we have lots of rules and lots of ways things can go wrong and lots of chaos. So this day and age, all of us are dealing with an extra amount of chaos when it comes to tariffs when you like to plan. I mean, everybody likes to plan and come up with pricing strategies and forecasts for the year. And how great is everybody doing when you're dealing with absolute and utter chaos? The good news is, as I was looking at trade stats, so everybody can look at trade stats, by the way. Census is amazing, one of our gazillion federal regulatory agencies in the US, but they keep track of trade stats by classification. So when you go through your 10-digit harmonized tariff schedule, US, everything for flowers is under Chapter 6. So that makes it super easy. So you can say, I want all the trade stats for Chapter 6. So I did that in advance today. So this should be an easy one. So Santiago will put you on the spot for the hell of it. So what country do we import the most flowers from in the United States?
It's basically
Santiago.
Colombia and the second one is
Colombia.
Hey!
Yes, Colombia is number 1. But last year, what country was number 2? And it wasn't Ecuador, I'll give you that.
It can be Dutch.
Canada. Crazy enough. So last year for 2024 trade stats, Colombia had 38.29% of the entire world market, a lot. Number 2, Canada, 22.42% of the market. And number 3 was Ecuador at 15.91% of the market. What percent of the market do you think China had last year?
I would say 8%, probably.
2%, 2.44%. Total trade volume for China for 2024 was $88.7 million. And by contrast, Colombia, 1.3 billion.
Yeah. So Jennifer, question for you. Maybe you could get in specific or maybe not. Does that include plants and flower, fresh cut flowers?
Everything under Chapter 6. So as long as it's exactly, that's everything in the industry. It should be, so in reality, as long as the classification starts with 06, it includes everything in Chapter 6.
Okay.
Canada is a surprise from what you said. Canada is a surprise, yeah.
So Canada is actually number 3. So what we did was we separated out 2025 trade data from now. So 2025, and it gives you up until March right now. So the government's amazing, but still a couple months behind, but still amazing to get this level of data. And this year, Colombia is 41%. So they went up trade data wise, and Ecuador is number 2 at 18%, and Canada went down to 17%. I thought that was really interesting.
Canada brings in a lot of plants.
Because of the peak season.
But it's also plants too, Santiago. So it's a combination of plants, trees, and shrubs. That's what I'm reading right now. It falls under Chapter 6 is trees, shrub, bushes, flowering plants, indoor plants, bulbs, tuber, roots, cut flowers, foliages, and branches. So it's a bunch of everything into one. Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of like tulips and things coming out of Canada as well.
So for the readers, I'm not sure if you could share links, but we'll give them the HTS link where they can download the entire chapter itself, and everybody can get to know the HTS itself and the link you should be using to look at the HTS. It's the interactive link that I love. But what's interesting and what I'm going to trend and follow is right now, China, not surprisingly, is number 8, right? And their trade volume is 22 million year to date so far in 2025. So the fun question is, will tariffs impact this number by the end of the year, right? Are we going to see a change and shift in this given the new tariffs that we have in place? So it'll be interesting to monitor and track how many are not going to purchase from China, given that you have options. You can go to Colombia, Ecuador, Canada. What's also super interesting that we were tracking and trending is how many entities are utilizing free trade agreements, because flowers is a lot easier than apparel and footwear and other commodities where you have whole lots of raw materials and ingredients that come in. For a flower, it's way easier to get an affidavit of origin, certificate of origin, to know where the flower was made and grown. And it's a lot easier to have proof of the origin of the flower and comply with the terms of a free trade agreement. right?
Wow.
And verification wise, you think about it, because what I have to deal with is when customs comes in to say you used a free trade agreement, you used, for example, DR CAFTA. Are you really eligible? Did you really use that properly, or did you try to use it and you're not really eligible and you really should owe me money? Maybe the goods really came from China and you transited through the Dominican Republic just to try to cheat me, just to try to steal, for example.
Wow.
So, but think about the floral industry. You guys are lucky because, you know, where it's grown is where it's grown. You've got one ingredient. You know, it's a very easy market. You know, it's like apples and flowers, super easy. You're not dealing with multitudes of ingredients that are going in and multitudes of raw materials and processing. So
Wow.
it's actually interesting to note that 100% of the imports utilize the free trade agreements because it's easy to comply with, which makes a lot of sense.
100% of what imports?
So, for example, Colombia importations.
Yeah.
So last year it was $1.3 billion. And then if you look at what percentage of that 1.3 billion used the free trade agreement, it's all of it.
It was 100% of it.
Exactly.
Wow.
Because then the real answer is why not?
Yeah.
Because if it's easy to do so, why wouldn't you? So in some instances, we actually do have clients that have said in the past, I don't want to be audited by customs. It's such a pain. I don't want to get the requests for information. I don't want to have to keep all the records of the free trade agreement and the raw materials, and I don't want to go through it. And I said, all right, you got to pay the man if you don't want to go through it. I mean, customs, if you're going to get a discount, you've got to have records and you've got to have a good compliance program in place, and you've got to, you know, do the work. You don't want to do the work, then fine. You got to pay a little extra, but you don't have the extra, you know? Yeah. So now, as a result of tariffs, I think we're seeing people question, you know, not taking advantage because everybody's looking for any way to save a buck right now.
Okay.
What
the
about
most
the free
important
trade
thing
agreement with Canada, Jen? How much they are using it for the flower industry?
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting, but it's 100% utilization, which is so interesting.
So you're saying in other industries that have free trade agreements, some of the companies do not use it.
Correct.
And we're in an industry that's blessed by being able to easily use it. Now, when it comes
not
to
with Ecuador, Sahid.
Correct. Ecuador has no right.
Yeah, Ecuador does not have it, but
we used to. There used to be love, not anymore. The love is gone.
No, we never had a trade agreement.
I think
we negotiated one, but we never signed a free trade agreement.
Wasn't there one for roses?
There was a tariff benefit due to fighting.
Was it GSP?
Yeah, illegal.
Yeah, it was GSP.
Smuggling.
Yeah. Wow. There used to be love, but the love is lost. But then they got discontinued. But they were removed.
We are love again. We are going to be love again.
Okay. Santiago is going to help negotiate it.
So that means our tariffs are only 10%. That means love.
So Jennifer, let me ask you a question. When it comes to Colombia, considering that there's not a trade deficit, that what I've heard, they actually buy more than what they ship into the U.S. Is there a chance for Colombia to go back to the free trade agreement, or are they going to get stuck with 10%?
So the fun part that we've been getting the question of quite often from everybody is, if we have a free trade agreement, why do we still have the reciprocal tariffs? So just back up for a second, because that's a biggie for USMCA also, and Canada and Mexico are top 10. You know, Mexico, for example, last year was number 5, and this year is still number 5. They're staying straight at number 5, and Canada was number 2 last year. They're number 3 this year. So Canada and Mexico are top 5 in terms of producers in your particular market. And there's a lot of beef with, we have a free trade agreement, but yet we now have this emergency border fentanyl tariff, you know, your 20%. And then we've got an additional 10% on top of that. So like, well, why do I have a free trade agreement? But now if you comply with the free trade agreement, you're not subject, which is nice. So, you know, that's the benefit in terms of utilizing the free trade agreement. You wind up getting the benefit of not having to deal with a reciprocal, for example. So the problem is you don't get that benefit for all the other free trade agreements. You know, you don't get any USMCA carve-outs for other free trade agreements. There's no DR CAFTA carve-out. There's no Colombia free trade agreement carve-out. A lot of people have said, why don't we have free trade agreement carve-outs from the reciprocal? And the answer has typically been the opposite of what you're saying, but we still have a deficit with that country. So there still is an emergency. We still have a national emergency. So we still need that 10%. But now, for example, if you do have trade stats where we don't have that deficit with Colombia, how do you establish that, right? Like, how do you keep that in play? And that's the fun reconsideration where we kind of have like a country by country reconsideration that's going on right now, which is why Santiago and I have like a lot of whiplash, because every day there's something else going on that we need to pay attention to. So we're looking at presidential executive orders, fact sheets, Federal Register notices, customs, CSMS messages every day. And every day, in addition to that, if you're not looking at Truth Social, you're also missing half the bucket as well, because God only knows what's posted on social media. So you need to follow all of these things to keep up with any potential changes in the market. And if you don't think there's going to be a change on a day-to-day basis, you're not in our world. Like every single day we're using magic 8 balls and praying and guessing in terms of where it's going to go, because nobody knows. What's interesting is China's still a big piece, grand scheme of things, because there's a whole lot of countries that have less than 1% of the market. So even 2% of the market's still something, in terms of the floral industry.
Yeah.
But the tariffs are a biggie. If anybody says that they have exact formulas or scientific numbers of exactly where this is going to go, they're lying.
Yeah. You remember about a month and a half ago, the Twitter was the main trigger for Colombia. And it could have bring a devastated scenario for the flower industry because of the Twitter of Presidente Petro. So that was very hard.
Yeah.
So we have to take care of, in consideration, not just the executive orders and Truth Social, but Twitter and any other social media posts by any politician in each country.
So let's, and this has been great, and the format's kind of changed because Jen, before you're so dynamic and you're awesome, and it's so fun to chat with you now. But let's jump into a question real quick. Can you walk us through the current state of tariffs affecting floral products, particularly any updates since our last episodes? That was 2 weeks ago. And I know when we jumped on here, Santiago was like, we have to be careful what we say because it might change tomorrow. So what should floral importers be watching for more closely in 2025?
Great question. So every day we're keeping up with all of these fabulous news sources. The biggest is changes with China and a trade deal, that's given us a 90-day pause for China. So China was at, realistically, you had, when you import, period, from China, you had your normal tariff, your normal classification and regular duty rate. Mm-hmm. Then you had your additional, what we call 301, which was in 2018, you are stealing our intellectual property rights. And as a result of that, we are imposing an additional tariff for your theft of intellectual property rights. That was during Trump's first administration. Okay. So that's where you separate it out into lists 1, 2, 3, and 4, for example, and can be as high as 25%. So we call that the 301 tariff. So anything from China is really what we're talking about in terms of changes, because that's the most in terms of what's changing. So what we had is your regular rate of duty plus your 301 plus the border IEEPA, which is this is a national emergency. Fentanyl is an emergency. Our border crisis is an emergency. As a result of our emergency, there's an additional 20%. And then we have a second emergency. Our trade deficit is an emergency. As a result of our trade deficit, we have an additional 10%. So that 10% for China has increased to 34, to 125, and now we have it back down to 10% for 90 days. Now, once that ends, who knows what's going to happen in the future? Everybody get out their magic 8-ball and make your bets, and let's get the casinos in and see what happens, because if anybody says they know exactly what'll happen, this is where I call BS, because it's not possible. You never know. What I do know is we're seeing more entities reconsider the America First agenda, meaning, is it possible for me to make the product in the United States? Is it possible for me to grow the flower in the United States? Is it possible for me to grow the plant in the United States? Do I really need to import to begin with? Because all other countries are now dealing with not the first border tariff, because that border tariff is Canada, Mexico / China. But everybody's dealing with that reciprocal emergency, that trade deficit. There's a trade deficit, and as a result, every country has to pay that 10%. Now, all other countries, they had a listing of many countries that are going to have potentially more than 10%. So there are a lot of negotiations going on individually with countries to determine if they're going to have more than 10% or not more than 10%. So it's going to be really interesting to see where all of that lands. So we have a page, for example, dedicated to reciprocal tariffs and like the list. I'll put that one in the chat box and you can share after.
But I posted a couple in the chat box already, so I'm going to continue to post them.
So to give you a glimpse, for example, Vietnam is the top 20 in terms of trading partner for 2025. So we're not talking about a huge trade volume. They're number 20. It's about 1.8 million in 2025. But imagine if you had a 46% duty rate with Vietnam, how many people would import flowers for a 46% duty rate, right? So that's the threat of the total reciprocal tariff, for example, from Vietnam, which I just put in the chat box. That's huge. So we'll find out whether or not we are able to negotiate a side deal with Vietnam, for example, to save from the 46%. Otherwise, now everybody's stuck with the 10% right now that you didn't have to pay before. So now you have your general rate of duty or your free trade agreement. And what's interesting to note from the trade data, we have Colombia, Canada, Mexico, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Israel as our top 10 countries. And what's interesting is out of those, a lot of them have free trade agreements. So you're used to not paying any duties whatsoever, claiming the free trade agreement, not paying anything. Now, from all of those, you're definitely paying something. Now you're at least paying your 10%, you know, and that's a big change. It's a big flip.
And that's not going to go away.
Right. I don't anticipate that. So Santiago, I know you're a fortune teller. So you tell us, do you think it'll go away? I don't.
No, I'm not. But I think if you're reading well, the politics of each country plays a very big role, not just the casino part of it. If it's a government, left government like today's Colombia, it can be permanent, or at least until the government changed their policies. And then if you're on the other side, like Ecuador today, which might change in 4 years from now, you can be signing a free trade agreement now under the tariffs and then probably exempt of any tariffs of 10% inclusive.
Wow, man, it's so interesting where we're headed, but it's at different times, and you know, it's what we woke up to, what we woke up to. So next question is for you, Santiago. Is how do you see new tariffs affect air cargo and floral freight costs from China or Asia or the Central South America? Just when it comes to, because we don't get too many flowers from China per se, but when it comes to, we do get Japanese, you know, Asia, certain areas, but when it comes to South and Central America, what are we looking at, and how has it affected air cargo?
This is tricky because this technically has nothing to do with the flower industry coming from South America to the US. Technically, it doesn't. But at the end of the day, what logistics does is make it efficient to move goods around the world. And then the main hub to get to South America today from China is through Miami. So when you are affecting, the tariffs are affecting the trade between China and the US, it could potentially be catastrophic for the flower industry if those flights will go directly to South America from China using using Brazil, using the Netherlands, using another route other than Miami because of the lack of cargo to Miami, which now is imposed, as Jen said, for 90 days. That will make very expensive to fly from South America to Miami, because now you have to pay the 2 trips, Bogota, Miami, and then Miami, Bogota, which will be with a deficit of probably 4-1, and in Ecuador 7-1, probably, according to the numbers. So the planes today, they fly full cargo out of Miami to South America, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Argentina, Mexico, and then they come back to the US full of flowers. So we depend on the cargo going to South America from China to make the profits on the air of the airlines. So you see the relationship is a very thin and dangerous balance.
Yeah, it's all a chain reaction, right?
Exactly.
It's all a chain reaction. So that means, just for clarity, that if imports from China reduce and we're not having those freights, then the charge to come in from Ecuador, Colombia is going to be,
the flowers will become more expensive regardless of the tariffs. And another thing, Jim was mentioning the 30 days window, 15 days window, 20 days window for a sea freight that is applicable. But in the air freight industry, it's a 24-hour window, because even if it's a same day window, the plane departed and then the new executive order and the cargo is arriving already with new rules. So it's a little bit crazy.
Wow.
It's not like you have a non-perishable item that you can shove in a bonded warehouse and hedge your bets to figure out what's going on. You have a perishable item that's very, sensitive to time. So it's more difficult to plan and forecast in that realm when if there's a change, the change is immediate.
And that's what's been happening. There's no heads up. And when it comes to tariffs in the world, and you've been in it for a bit, are tariff changes immediate usually, or do they take time to develop?
With this administration, it's immediate, and that's the hard part. So the impact itself is felt immediately. Once you have this executive order, the implementation is immediate. What's interesting is I was at the CBP summit last week. So U.S. Customs and Border Protection has the pleasure of implementing and enforcing the executive orders to ensure that they work, which means every executive order gets turned into another classification, another Chapter 99 HTS, the harmonized tariff schedule that you wind up including in addition to the regular HTS. So this is what we call tariff stacking. So this is what gets to be a lot of fun, which is how you're tracking the 301, the IEEPA tariff, the regular rate of duty that you're dealing with. So what Customs said that shocked everyone is they're now reprogramming their systems to have the ability to accommodate up to 32 line items, HTSs, per line. So imagine if we were ever in a psychotic enough world where you potentially had 32 potential classifications that apply to one item. So right now, in a worst case scenario for China, you've got your regular flower, you've got your 301, you've got your IEEPA border, and you have your IEEPA reciprocal. That's 4, and that still stinks. Imagine if you had up to 32 for one item. Everybody was insanely shocked that was even a potential. Like, can you imagine, Santiago, what you have to think about to get to the point where you could have 32 classifications that apply to one item?
Wow.
Like, what world?
Add the different routes to it in the different countries that the origin is, and then you got a very nice environment to work.
So pardon my ignorance, what are the implications? I didn't get that word right. But what does happen if something like that happens?
More duties, more duties on top. I mean, more ramifications. So you have, realistically, there are so many different pathways for additional duties to be applied. So you've got 232, you've got 301, you've got IEEPA, you have different mechanisms for additional tariffs and duties. Right now, what we're seeing are those 3 utilized more. But now, in some instances, worst case scenario, imagine you also have anti-dumping and countervailing duties on top. That's an additional line you need.
Okay, now I feel that.
So the question is, could it ever be a potential to have the ability to have 10 different line items that you need to incorporate 10 different HTSs for one item, for one physical item you're bringing into the United States? Imagine having so many implications where you'd have 32 classifications for one item. Like, to me, I can't even mentally think of 32 different things, 32 different classifications that would come up for one particular item. Now everyone's looking for different, what we call 98 provisions, like Chapter 98 qualifying items to take you away from reciprocal tariffs. Basically, what everybody's looking for right now are exemptions and ways to reduce your tariff burden. You know, what are the ways around this? What can I do?
So I think that goes to my next question.
Yeah.
Is what can we do in the flower
right.
industry? what can the flower RD?
Right.
But let me say, I think this is a question, right? Are there legal paths or exemptions that companies can explore to reduce their tariff burdens today?
Absolutely. And I mean, that's the $1 million question. And that's what we're spending a whole lot of time on these days. So one of the first things is going back to the actual producer, the grower, and saying, you got to work with me, buddy. Is there a price reduction you can give me as a result of the additional tariff I now have to deal with? Okay. So can you take the burden with me? Right? So if you're my seller and you want to sell to me and you still want to do business, then maybe we can renegotiate our contract. So if you have contract in place, renegotiating whatever those numbers are and renegotiating pricing. That's where we're updating contracts and renegotiating right and left. That is something that's being used widely. Another aspect is, are you buying direct from the grower or are you using what's called a middleman? I don't know the percentage-wise enough in the industry per se, is if you are the farmer grower, do I have a direct relationship with you, or am I utilizing an agent and or middleman who I'm sourcing from who charges a markup?
Okay.
Maybe you guys can fill me in more on the industry. Does the industry go direct or do you often use middlemen and agents?
The industry works. The industry works in a very vertically integrated chain, Jen. Mm-hmm. The producer, I will say 70% of the producers have their own distribution channels. So they are the importer, they are the distributor.
They're direct, right.
Yeah, they get to the retailers.
Exactly. So there's no middleman there, because there is a program called First Sale. If you have a middleman, for example, and there is a first sale prior to importation, then you can try to take advantage of that first sale valuation if you meet the requirements of the program. In the example Santiago mentioned, where the grower has his own integration and has his own relationship with the importer itself, and there's a direct relationship, you don't have a second sale. It's a direct first sale, so the lowest value is already being utilized. There's nothing else to do there.
There's 25% of the industry average that does that. They can benefit from it. So
right. Yeah. So it's worth mentioning first sale is a possibility for that percentage that doesn't deal directly with the grower. If you have a third party, so using an example, if I purchase from Santiago, but Santiago is not the grower, Santiago has a direct relationship with the grower. Yeah. Santiago then purchases for me for direct export to the United States from the grower, then grower ships direct to me in the United States, then I can go to my lawyer, have them review the purchase order, but Santiago has to be transparent with me, right? Santiago's got to provide his purchase order, his commercial invoice. I've got to be able to see the bill of lading to show the direct exportation to the United States, or airway bill in that instance. And I have to be able to show a direct export to the US as a result of Santiago's purchase to the grower, and then qualify for the use of that first sale program. And then I tell customs, I purchase from Santiago, Santiago purchases from the grower, here's Santiago's invoice from the grower, here's my invoice from Santiago, customs, I want to use Santiago's price. He gets a better price from the grower because he charges me cost plus a profit. So let's say Santiago buys $100,000 worth of flowers from the grower. Santiago charges me $105,000, $110,000. Santiago wants to make a profit too, right? Yes. I don't want to pay that 10% duty on $110,000. I want to pay the 10% duty on $100,000, right? Mm-hmm. That's the first sale program.
Wow. I wonder I wonder if it's being implemented in the
Absolutely. Everybody and more is talking about first sale and utilizing it, and many incorrectly. So there are a lot of factors you have to evaluate to do it right. It's easy, unfortunately, to think, sure, I should just be able to do it. But, you know, like anything else in life, there are steps in a process. So you got to do it right if you want to do it right.
We have a question from our audience. Alex Frost, he has this machine, like a refrigerator for a vending machine for the flower industry. Can we ignore China tariffs by shipping parts to Colombia, assembling them and importing into U.S.?
I beg of you, don't ever say his name. Delete that from the program. And when you ask questions like that, you say a friend wants to know if a friend. You start with a friend.
He knew that it would come out. He knew it would come out. So
well, I'm telling you, buddy, let's start over. First of all, I don't want to hear the name. I don't want to know the name. Second of all, we are talking a lot about, and customs, I will tell you, they made a very big stink at the summit that they have a very America first / enforcement driven agenda for this administration that is not going away anytime soon. And they are looking incredibly closely with a lot of technology and a lot of AI that customs has invested in. And they are explicitly looking for what's called transshipment, i.e., flowers being grown in China, shipped to Colombia, and all of a sudden you're saying it's exported from Colombia. I should be paying duties as if it was under Colombia's free trade agreement, for example, and the Colombia reciprocal tariff, not China. In that instance, it's fraud. It's criminal. There is a criminal implication for transshipment and pretending the country of origin is a different country to avoid tariffs. Now, the other big conversation we're having with everyone these days is, when is enough to change the country of origin? What exactly do I have to do if, well, in your industry, you're not so lucky. A flower is grown in one country, and country of origin is the country of production, the country of growth. Where is the flower grown? If you have a flower grown in China and you put it in a pot in Colombia, not good enough, baby. The flower is still of Chinese origin. So simple BS assembly is not good enough to qualify for a change in country of origin. The origin is the country of production, growth, and or where you substantially transform the origin, where you change the character, the name, the use of the item. What are you changing? A flower is a flower.
Jim, to compliment, and I'm going to compliment you with a question. The flower industry is a huge importer of goods that usually are produced in China, and then
Pots, right?
What is the impact? And that was a little bit of the question.
Yeah.
If you are importing to Colombia equipment
importing to Colombia, say that again.
Yeah.
Like, give me an idea, like Chinese equipment going to Colombia.
Chinese motors for cold rooms that are imported from China to the U.S., reassembling in the U.S. and re-exported to Colombia. What is the percentage of spare parts that qualifies that as an American equipment if the parts are coming from China?
Right, but that question doesn't make sense in regards to that. So, like, for example, it's coming to the United States just to be exported thereafter?
Reassembly?
Okay, but there are other things you can think of in that instance. So, for example, if you're bringing an item to the United States strictly to thereafter export, let's think about whether we can use.
No, you're bringing parts,
okay,
right,
to assembly equipment, and then you're manufacturing.
Right, but my point is, hold on, but back up, because that's an important point. If you're bringing an item into the United States without the intention of the item staying in the United States and being consumed in the United States, that's where you have foreign trade zones, bonded warehouses, immediate exportation. You've got other tools to utilize to bypass paying customs duties if you're not intending to consume the item in the United States. That's my point.
But if you are assembling and you are branding that as a U.S. engine or whatever you are
right,
doing.
But the point is you probably shouldn't be branding anything as U.S. if it has an imported part, because the Made in USA standard is a Federal Trade Commission standard. And if you say something is made in the United States, the test is it all or substantially all made in the United States? And if you have an imported...
that have that, Jen, that says, okay, if it's 70%, spare parts are 70% from that country, that means that's the country of origin. there's other countries that apply.
Right. We don't have a percentage. It's all or substantially all is our test in the United States. I put it in the chat box for made in the United States.
And again, let's use it as we're talking about this because we're talking
Right.
about machines for the flower industry.
Right.
So when it comes to assembled in the United States, or
Right.
does that make a difference?
I mean, in terms of what? In terms of if you have an assembly operation in the United States and you're thereafter exporting, maybe, for example, there's duty drawback in some instances where if you're paying duties and you're thereafter exporting, you can ask for a refund of 99% of the duties that you paid because you can say, I didn't really use the item in the United States. It's not fair that I paid the money and I exported thereafter. I want a refund.
Yeah.
So there are different ways to skin the cat for mitigation strategies if your ultimate use is not in the United States.
Wow. Interesting. So great conversation to both of you. Thank you so much. I want to, Santiago, you're good. You're awesome. You're cool. Jen's freaking awesome. So thank you for the introduction. And I'd love to have you guys on again as we continue to see the changes, right? So what's going to happen in 90 days? So that's going to be.
I bet my money on Santiago to figure it out.
You think Santiago will figure it out first?
No. There's no way to figure it out. What I see is, I'm going to use Jen's words. What I see is a policy America first. And depending on that, what the agreement will do is put jobs into America, bringing industries to America.
Yeah.
If we are going to the flower industry, okay, I'm not going to talk about other industries because it's a very complex environment to talk about. But if you're talking to the flower industry and you're producing flowers and you're selling bouquets, that is, I think, one of the only opportunities to put America first in that policy. You could potentially start building bouquets in the U.S. instead of building them outside. The labor cost will be very difficult because of the cost of labor in the U.S. But that's one of the things you could be potentially looking at that. The other change that you could do is, and I'm not answering your question, Sahid, because I don't have my crystal ball with me. It's out of battery today. But the other thing you could do potentially is, and it could trigger a change in logistics. So to save money, flowers might start to increase the sea freight, which will be catastrophic for Florida and for Miami. It'll be catastrophic, let me tell you, because logistics is not just about import flowers and selling cell phones. It's all about it's military, it's strategic, it brings a lot more politics into it. When you have a country like a small country like Ecuador that has 25 different carriers flying in daily, and you have Colombia that has a similar number, you're talking about a strategic economic growth for the country and unlimited opportunities. A country like Mexico, probably 100 times bigger than Ecuador, doesn't have the same logistics. And it all depends on the flower. It's all flower dependent. So the flowers are going sea freight, the logistics is dead. And with that, emergency supplies, pharmaceutical, spare parts, the oil industry depends on the flights that are coming down with oil industry spare parts and going out with flowers. That will disappear. So the advantages and disadvantages of a flower industry in Colombia and Ecuador brings a lot more things than just the flowers itself, going sea freight and saving some money there.
Wow. Well said, and thank you for that. And so I guess this is going to be a difficult question, but I do see the positives as well, as you're saying, bringing industry. What have you seen as the positives from this, and what can be positives? Because that's very important. People are saying, "Hey,
job security."
Job security, right? Okay, for you.
I mean, a lot of ice cream. I think Haagen-Dazs is doing really well in Talenti. I think their stock's gone up in my books. I know I'm eating a lot more of it. And coffee companies, we're all drinking a lot more of it. And alcoholic beverages, a lot more consumption. I mean, everybody needs something to get through this, whatever that may be. But I think the the value of brokerage networks, the value of your understanding who's within your supply chain and your relationships, the value of a resilient, body. I think everybody right now has to be a little more resilient, humble, slash able to bounce back more than ever before. And you're seeing brokers, software providers having to keep up with changes by the second. Yeah. And that's a difficult thing for anyone to do when we all like predictability and you don't have it right now. So being resourceful, having the right supply chain partners to count on and rely on to keep up with crazy changes is huge in this particular world. So if you don't have your own Santiago's of the world and counsel that is up to date on your industry and on your tariffs and on what's going on with your world right now, I'm also seeing companies say, wait a minute, I guess should be looking into this. And now we're getting back to the basics, which is also, I think, really important because customs has the ability to audit and go back 5 years, which is your statute of limitations from your date of entry. That's a long time. And what we're seeing are entities say, wait a minute, maybe I wasn't always using the right classification. Maybe I had a misunderstanding on what constitutes a substantial transformation and I wasn't using the right country of origin. Or oops, maybe I have a valuation related concern because like Santiago said, I really do use related parties and I never really looked at that actual formula on, Santiago has his brother that's the grower and his cousin is the importer and they're related and they're giving each other better pricing than they should otherwise give me if I was buying for them. So what happens is customs being cheated out of money because that's what customs thinks, that these related parties are working together. So we're talking more about these basic building blocks than ever before. Because if you don't have your basics, you can't come up with mitigation strategies if you don't have the right classification, the right country of origin, and the right valuation. We can't get to tariff mitigation possibilities if we don't have the building blocks. So what I put in the chat box for everybody are the top 10 tips when importing, which are the building blocks. Those are the basics. So we are now seeing more companies say, okay, now that I need to reevaluate whether or not I can really make the item in the United States, whether I can comply with the America First trade policy, where do I really get my raw materials from? And we're seeing more companies say, even if I wanted to grow this in the US, I can't for whatever reason. I still need a raw material from outside the US. I still need to import X. But people are reconsidering what their options are. Right now, your market is only 2% reliant upon China. Are we going to dedicate that 2% or are we able to move away from that? So for that 2%, you consider those country of origin changes, maybe that machinery change, maybe that, just because a machine is owned by a Chinese national and it winds up being moved to another country, if that machine all of a sudden gets moved to Vietnam and that processing occurs now in Vietnam just because a Chinese person happens to be the owner of that machine, that doesn't make the processing happening in China. It's physically happening in Vietnam. So I think we are going to see a lot of questions and a lot of unfortunate fraudulent activity as well, which is what customs is looking for. Customs is looking for transshipment. They're looking for valuation errors. They're looking for companies that are double invoicing, that are where Santiago's saying, Jen, these flowers are from China, but here's an invoice for $100,000. That's what you better pay me. But don't worry, for customs, here's another one for $50,000. It's no biggie. Everybody's doing it. No, it is a biggie. Nobody should be doing it, and you shouldn't be having two sets of documents, two sets of payments ever. We're seeing a lot of questions in relation to, well, can't I just make something a service fee and split up the invoices? No two sets of invoices now or ever. Please don't do that. What am I actually paying Santiago for the flowers? That's the value I need to report to customs and pay duties on. Period. End of story. One set of invoices, one set of proof of payment in a perfect world.
And just for in case someone jumped in, these are make-believe stories about Santiago.
Correct. That's right. Santiago is amazing. He does nothing wrong in any way, shape, or form. He's just a guinea pig for my stories.
Sahid, let me pause here. You can imagine with Jen, we co-board the Florida Customs and Brokers Association.
That must be fun.
So that you see the tone.
Oh boy,
it's just retaliation.
Oh no, she's being PC right now, because when we were behind the scenes, she wasn't very PC. It was great. I'm like, I want to have a beer with her.
I want to include what Jen said today about the positive things. I want to include a couple of more positive things that are happening. Transparency is one of them, and I want to talk about security, not just as a like an ice cream after, it's not. It's very important. It's very important because the flower industry has been hit very bad and has been damaged very bad by this lack of transparency and the drug cartels in South America. So now that transparency is coming to the table, it'll bring a lot of good things, So I'm actually feeling very good about it. At the end of the day, always tariffs at 10% or 15 or whatever it is, it always affects. Yeah. But the case of Ecuador, that hasn't had any free trade agreement, and the exports to the U.S. has grown up a lot. Yeah. So everything is positive outcome for Ecuador, not just for Colombia, and specifically depending on what happens with the politics in the next elections. It can be a very positive environment and come back to the free trade agreement and good environment. And then the other thing positive, that I was talking to a top executive of a main airline coming to Miami with flowers. I don't want to say his name, but we were talking about what is this positive for the U.S. Might not be positive for the industry itself, but the U.S. is winning. There were a lot of cities that were just disappearing, the poverty and the damaging of those cities. Now it's becoming a hope again for those cities coming back. The industries to the U.S. will bring a lot, and it will bring a very good market as well. It will grow. Today, the U.S. represents 15% of the total world trade in imports. Is the importer of 15%, far away from China, that is 10%, far away. So now it's going to become bigger. It's going to become stronger. And the flower industry, there will never be Ecuadorian roses in producing any other country than in Ecuador. And Colombia is the most efficient producer of flowers in the world. And that has no competition. Mm-hmm. Not even the African countries can compete with that quality and efficiency price-wise. So I don't think the industry will be hit very bad. The other thing we are doing with one of the biggest flower producers, distributors, is working on an agreement to integrate not just the vertically integrated logistics, but now you have to analyze the southbound cargo of it, and you have to somehow integrate your logistics into that if you want to survive the next years. Because the only way to avoid this transit risk that we have talked about several times of disappearing from the flights, it's to control a portion of that market. The flower growers control 100% of the flights coming to Miami, but they control 0% of the flights going back to South America. So in order to do alliances and partnerships to control part of that market, that will be the future we'll see that in the next 4 to 10 years, how the flower big importers will start to control a portion of the southbound cargo.
Oh, well said. Well said. Thank you so much to both of you for being on the show, for sharing. Thank you to the people that chimed in, even though I deleted the comment just in case. But thank you, everybody. Really, thank you so much. Jennifer, I know that it was hard to get you on, and your time is very valuable. So I thank you so much for the energy and the information. Santiago, thank you so much for putting this together. So I look forward, maybe in 90 days, we can maybe have another recap. What do you think, Jen?
There you go. Love it. Would love it. Everybody should now be studying for the customs broker exam or going to law school or getting a job in trade compliance. It's a good time. Everybody's hiring.
Or call Jennifer at Diaz Trade Law.
There you go. Anytime. Anytime.
And get to the Florida Customs Brokers Association. Get there. You'll find a lot of things, a lot of good things to know about this. It'll have a very huge impact.
Fantastic.
Sure. And this is World Trade Month also. So a quick plug for FCBF,
Right.
which the Florida Customs Brokers and Forwarders Santiago is talking about. We're both on the board of directors of, and we are doing a World Trade Month partnership with U.S. Customs where we have 10 free webinars with U.S. Customs, some
Okay.
of which are going to be on demand and PowerPoints on the FCBF website. So if you look at the FCBF site that I'll also put in the chat box, you can see we have 5 more webinars to come for free. So they're on great customs and trade topics. I'm going to put the site in the box for everybody to have for fcbf.com, and you can see under events a lot of events coming up. We also keep a calendar of everything going on, and all of those are virtual as well. And the next one is an overview of the USDA import process from entry, pest ID to fumigation. So it's
There you
a
go.
really great one for this particular industry, and it's free, so nobody can complain about that.
All right, cool. I might just share that on my LinkedIn. So take a look at
Yeah,
look
please
out
do.
for everybody on the LinkedIn as well. So thank you to both of you. Really appreciate your time. We're wishing you guys a great weekend. And thank you again, Jennifer, and thank you, Santiago. I'm gonna put you guys in the
Thank you for the
room
invitation.
and our goodbyes. No, but thank you so much for coming up with the idea. And I think it was a great show and a lot of fun. So thank you
Awesome.
again,
It was a
guys.
pleasure. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Bye, Jen.
Joining. Take care, guys. Bye-bye. So now you see 3 of me. Kind of cool, right? Kind of cool to see 3 of me. But my guy in the background. There we go. So thank you, Jen, for joining. Thank you, Santiago, as well. Great information. This has been an extreme learning experience for me. Not just today's conversation, but all the other episodes that we've had have been an awesome learning experience for myself and everyone involved. I know that there's been many people watching and following, and thank you today for following as well. Again, I'm adding another link. Jennifer did such a great job of we linked the heck out of this today. So do make sure to copy the links or check out the comments, and you'll see a bunch of links added to them. And hopefully, let me see if I could copy all of them. No, I can't. But, please grab them. There's some great information and great links, and I'm going to try to see if I could find those webinar links as well and share them on LinkedIn, because I think it's as important that we all stay educated and well informed. On June 6th at Floriexpo, I'm also doing a panel with some industry experts as well to talk more about the tariffs. And again, as we started the conversation, Santiago and Jennifer said, come June, it might change, right? So stay tuned, stay connected, stay aware, and stay on the up and up, right? So as Jennifer said, don't break any laws, right? don't break any laws. Know what you can do and what you can't do to stay very well educated, because sometimes mistakes happen, right? But as long as we're educated, as we say on the Blue Show, with information comes power, with information comes good decisions. So let's keep that going. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and I'll see you next time. Next week, we're having Melinda Knuth. So do join us. I believe it's Tuesday. Melinda Knuth talking. She's Dr. Melinda Knuth. I'm talking about statistics within the flower industry when it comes to trends and usages. So really excited about having her on. And thank you again for everybody that joined. Thank you again to Jennifer and Santiago. Take care, everybody.